All right, we're going to keep it moving. Next up, we have got Maun from Ticketmaster. If we can give him a big welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
What's that? We good? We're good. That's not good.
All right, folks that are in the back, if you could go kind of find some seats, that would be awesome while we're getting set up here, because there are tons of seats over here. If you have a free seat next to you, can you please raise your hand? Awesome, folks. Let's find some seats. Just because I keep waiting for someone to come in and tell us that you can't stand up against the wall, because there's this thing called fire code. You know, those things that keep us safe. So let's, if you can, please find a seat while we get set up for this next talk.
Okay. Cool. So I feel like I'm following like Tony Robbins. That was really good. It was a really good presentation. My name is Maun. I'm from Ticketmaster. My presentation is called How Tools Shape Culture. And I'm going to talk about the tools that we're using at Ticketmaster and how we use that to kind of change the way that people work at our company. So I'm going to share some of the pain points we've had in the past and then talk about the solutions of those pain points and kind of go through that. I'll highlight 3 different tools specifically, and I'll kind of go into some detail on how that works. So some of our pain points, I got to Ticketmaster around 2011, and I was going through like, you know, the tools that we were using and how that worked, and trying to understand like, what do we use for code repositories? What do we use for deployments? What do we use for builds, server provisioning, so on and so forth. So I went through and kind of did a kind of an investigation of that. I was brought in as a release engineer, primarily for the QA group, and I was responsible for deploying code for my specific group to the QA environment. So it was pretty micro and pretty small. And some of the things that I noticed was that at Ticketmaster, the code was opaque. Like, you couldn't see it. You didn't know, like, what other people were doing in the company. Like, you couldn't see other people's code if they were on a different team. If you wanted to get to the code repository, you needed to, like, open a ticket. You needed to get a username and password. You needed to pull out the code. You needed to find out where the code was. And you had to do this for each, like, repository, right? So, like, the code was opaque. We had siloed deployments. Deployments that were done in dev were done by developers, and they would hand it to another group in QA, and then they would do another deployment of the same product, and then you would go down the line, and it would keep handing off to different people. So the deployments were not done by one group or individual or team, or like a product team. They were done by different teams throughout the organization. And the third thing was like fragmented ownership from a operational perspective. You would basically, you know, develop code, and then you would just throw it over to the operations group, and whatever happened to that code, you know, God bless their souls. So I'll talk about opaque code first and what that looks like. It's kind of like, you know, you got like a camera, but you're looking at it as like this cool piece of equipment, and then it's got like a lens cap on, and you can't see anything, and it's totally worthless. So, like I said, getting access to the code was very difficult. It was difficult to contribute to other teams. It was, we didn't know where the code was. It wasn't advertised. We didn't really have like a code review process at our organization. There was like some tools, some people were using like Fisheye or like using other code review tools, but some teams were using email, and some teams just weren't even doing it. Right? So we didn't have like a culture of code review. And then the visibility was really low, and there was no collaboration between the teams. Like, you know, Team A would maybe collaborate amongst themselves, but then Team B had no idea what they were doing or how they were developing code. So we were like locking people out from like the first line of code. We'd write code, and then we would commit it, and then no one could ever see it again until we were actually like maybe deploying it, right? So we kind of picked up this tool. We call it GitLab. It's this open source tool. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's like an internal GitHub, basically. And we were like, okay, let's build this out. Let's bring this to the organization with the goal of transparency, right? Let's let other people see what other people are developing in our organization. So we pulled it in. Okay, it's like this open source thing. We deployed it. No one knew what Ruby was, so we had to figure that out. And we got it running, and it was pretty, like didn't work at first, and it was like kind of terrible. And we're like, okay, so let's go back and learn more Ruby. And then eventually we got it fixed, and it was like, okay, cool. And you put it on like bare metal, and it's like humming along, and it's totally awesome, and it's SSDs, and it's pretty sweet. So it's got transparency. It's like this GUI. You go to it. You can like add people to groups. You can like say, oh, I want to see your code. You can. It's like LDAP. You just type in your username and password. You're in. You make your repositories public. Everybody can see what's going on. But like, oh, I don't like that. You can do merge requests. It's like GitHub. It's cool. So that was like a big change for us, right? So like we went from like this like SVN repository that no one could see and no one knew what anyone else was working on and no one could access. And we kind of like, conversely now it's like this this thing in this GUI, and you just go and you can like see everybody's projects and you can see everybody's code. And if you want to contribute to the code, you can put in a merge request, and you can do code review in the tool. And it was a pretty dynamic change for the organization. It's like transparency of the code made a big cultural shift just by bringing in this one tool. And once we figured out Ruby, we were good. So that was solid. So that was a good change for us. So the other day I was messing around with it, and I wanted to learn more about Docker. I need to deploy Docker. I need to deploy Jenkins. I'm going to use Docker to do it. So I grabbed their image, and then I was like kind of messing around with it because I was like, oh, I need my own plugins and I need my own config files. And anyway, it's cool because now I've got other people collaborating with me in our organization to kind of like work on this thing, and everybody can see it. And it's not like a difficult process where they have to like go open a ticket to get a username and password. So that's handy. So what are the results? Over the last year, maybe a year and a half, we're up to about 1,000 users in GitLab, which is great. We've got a lot of high collaboration with teams and between teams. Code review is very common, and it's transparent. You can do easy commit tracking and metrics, easy user access, less hurdles, and we can version our documentation. So that's a real benefit where we like brought in the tool and it kind of dramatically changed how people engage in their workflows. So that's cool. So that's our first example. Next issue we had was silo deployments. So I got a lot of time. I'm good. I'm going to slow down. I thought I was going to run out of time. I'm like, look at this. I'm like, wow, better go slower. Okay, so silo deployments, right? So I was brought in as like the release engineer for the QA team, and I'm only supposed to deploy to QA, and that's my job. And devs deploy to dev, and then ops deploys to prod, and nobody knows how other people are deploying anything. Right, but I'm supposed to know because they're handing me a Confluence document with like, 50 lines of scripting, and I'm going to deploy it successfully. Right. So it's like a bad game of telephone, like the purple monkey dishwasher thing. Like somebody says one thing, and then by the time it gets to the other end, it makes absolutely no sense. Or maybe it's just like you just go in and there's two people, and I'm telling you purple monkey dishwasher, and you're not understanding what I'm saying. So deployments at Ticketmaster, when I got there were some scripting, right? It's not like, we didn't have like Bash, but like, there's some of it was manual, right? And some of the stuff that I was working on was all brand new. So like we were like this brand new initiative, and we didn't have any deployment infrastructure at all built around it. So it was like, you just do whatever you got to do. So I'm basically like SCPing like tarballs to servers. And then I'm like, restarting Apache, it's a mess, right? So like the devs are handing off to me. I don't know what I'm doing because I'm not writing the code. I'm deploying it with like SCP and restart, and we don't have a lot of control. We're handing it to production and the production teams, right? And they're like, well, I'm dealing with like I've got an on sale for like Garth Brooks, and he's going to sell a zillion tickets. I don't have the time to deploy your code. I don't care. I got to worry about like keeping the site running and making money. So we didn't have a whole lot of control of like the scheduling or quality of our code. Wow. This is intimate. Okay. That's cool. If you don't want me to talk anymore, just say so, man. All right, so bad throughput, right? And the deployments, we don't have any ownership, right? And it's like you build this code and then you don't run the code. So that was like the culture, right? And this is me SCPing my code, and I'm doing it 100 times. So, Damon talked earlier. He talked this morning about, and he works for Simplify Ops, and they took on like Rundeck, which is an open source tool, and you can use it for like, it's basically like a GUI interface that you can just like do scripting with, but it's kind of cool because it's got like centralized authentication, centralized logging. It's got like node awareness. Anyway, so we're using this tool, right? So let's use Rundeck. Let's try it. So we pull it in, and I didn't know how to do that either. Like I didn't know how to do Ruby and GitLab. So I was like, I threw this thing, and it's pretty simple. It's like a jar, and you just run it on a box. And then I figured out LDAP with that, and I did like, we set up projects. And you can like, it has like an API, so you can like have like, you know, Jenkins or whatever build tool you're using, like talk to it. So like you can like interface with it and does like webhooks back and forth. You can go post to Jira, whatever you need to do. So we went from like, okay, let's take our scripting where I'm SCPing stuff onto boxes, and let's just like use this tool, and then I'll go ahead and basically embed scripts in the tool itself, and I can like push buttons and watch deployments go, right? Like, because it'll go down the nodes, it'll like go serial, like node 1, node 2, node 3. We figured out like later on, like when we had like 50 nodes, that we probably should do that more parallelism. So like we did like, you know, 25 and 25, like blue-green. But that was kind of the evolution of it. So we rolled this out. And no one wanted to use it. They're like, this is dumb. I don't want to use this tool. I want to SCP into boxes for some reason. And I was like, okay, well, let's just try it like in pre-production. And like that way there's like no risk, and the ops guys are like, I don't want this tool to go away. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get the QA guys to use it. And so we were using it in QA, and then devs kind of got into it too, and then we started using it in dev and QA. So that was kind of exciting. So we're using it in pre-production, and then we would do this thing, and then like we would go to ops, and then they would basically take the exact same script we were using in Rundeck, and they would just run it in a terminal. Like, okay, that's kind of silly, but sure, whatever you guys want to do. So, you know, basically it was like, I wasn't really asking like permission to use this stuff. I was just kind of putting it out there and like making people use it, or asking them to rather. And it was kind of like a forgiveness, not permission thing, right? So like we started doing it, it was like, oh, this is cool. Like our velocity is increasing a little bit in pre-production. We're getting deployments out the door faster. This is exciting. And it's pre-production, so it's like low risk, right? Like, so, okay, dev fell over because Rundeck did something wrong, because we told it to do something wrong, and, you know, oh well. So we got buy-in from like early adopters, right? That's how you do it. You get buy-in from early adopters, these people who are like kind of like, I'm going to use this really cool tool, and it's awesome in 2011, and I'm going to do this thing, and I don't want SCP code onto boxes anymore. And then like we start telling them about like, hey, oh, isn't this cool? They're doing lots of deployments a day or deployments a week, right? Their velocity is increasing, and we can evangelize the success of that and share that with the rest of the company. And then the company says, okay, well, if they're doing it this way, I want to try it too. And I'm like, no problem. Let's make you a project. Let's get you in on this tool. And like, and then we get everybody else in, right? So that's how it falls down. So eventually, we had it like in full use, right? In both pre-production and production. We got the operations guys to kind of buy off on it. You know, and we had to go kind of sell it. But you kind of sell it because it's a tool that's effective, right? If the tool is effective, then it's easier to sell. If the tool doesn't work and it's not good, then no one's going to want it. But if it's effective and you can show results, then people are going to want to use it. So that's what we did with Rundeck. And we kind of solved our siloed deployment problem. So then today, like we have like, this is a very kind of rudimentary interface, but it works. But anyway, it's cool. It's much better than SCP in code. You've got like a drop-down menu for your version. You can go to like your Nexus repo, and it like can pull down like whatever exists. You can just, hit buttons and push deployments, and then when things break, you can take the version and roll it back and hit buttons again, and it fixes it. So it's kind of cool. So anyway, point being is, the other piece was that once we got operations working with it, the key component was like, we don't want to have a handoff anymore, right? So now we've got this tool, everything's streamlined, right? Everybody logs into it, the logging's all in one place, we know what people are doing, so from an audit perspective, it's easy to track. And then we can say, well, maybe the operations team, they can go focus on the Garth Brooks on sale, they can go focus on whatever fire they need to go fight, and maybe the developers can start focusing on deployments, right? And they can focus on deployments not just in dev, but maybe even in QA, and maybe even in production, right? And so we were able to kind of get that wall broken down where previously it was a handoff and I'm handing somebody like literally handing them a printed Confluence document on how to deploy my code, and we changed that to the developers will just deploy their code. And they'll have an easy rollback strategy in the event that something goes wrong. And if something does go wrong, we have everything audited in one place. It's all located. We have authentication, we have security, and we have logging. So we took Rundeck and we basically just plugged it into everything, and then developers just started pushing code out to production. And nothing, like it didn't blow up. The world did not end. And that was pretty exciting. And especially at a company like Ticketmaster where you have thousands and thousands of hosts and lots of money at stake. It was pretty scary, but we had some trust from like, okay, this worked in pre-production, we're comfortable with it, and we were able to move that into prod. So engineers held the keys, right? We had control over our scheduling. We didn't have to go to operations, and it didn't matter if there was an on sale. Maybe it did. Okay, let's be honest. Maybe it did. But you know, based on their throughput or what they were working on, we didn't have to conflict with that. And that erased a lot of bandwidth issues. And we turned into a culture of like, you deploy this and own it, right? So, and I'll get into that in a second in the next slide. Just sort of some success metrics from Rundeck. You know, and like I know some companies like they're like, we deploy 1,000 times a day, and isn't that cool? And like, okay, so we're not there yet, right? But our old velocity, like you know, a few years back was like maybe 1 to 2 deployments a month, right? We're really like a Java shop, and now we're maybe doing like 2 to 15 times a month per product, right? And we've got like you know 50 plus products. So a lot of deployments are going out, and that's pretty cool. Some teams are doing it like 4 times a week, which is pretty major for us. And that's a big difference than it was you know, several years back. And then in addition to that, the success rate is also higher because the people who are deploying it actually have a good understanding of what the code is doing. And then in the event that we do have to roll back, we can rapidly do that in an easier way. We can rapidly troubleshoot it because we're in the middle of the windows. Like the engineers themselves are in the windows as opposed to handing it to somebody else to handle it. And we have shorter deployment windows because people know how to like deploy it quicker, or the scripting that we're doing is more polished. Okay, so finally, third topic, and the tool that goes along with it. So fragmented ownership. So we talked about opaque code. We talked about like siloed deployments. Now we're going to talk about fragmented ownership and this culture that we used to have, where basically if you're a development engineer for a particular product, you don't necessarily have to worry about the ownership of it when it's out in the wild. That's an ops problem, right? And like I saw this slide earlier today, and so I think I need to change it next time, but like I guess it's pretty popular and it's a popular meme. Yeah, it's good, right? And that's like Drew Barrymore, by the way. Like this is before she married Adam Sandler. So, all right. So fragmented ownership, right? So what's the problem with that? Why do we care, right? So part of the issue was that like our monitoring system was not really application focused. We had a monitoring system at Ticketmaster, but it was like system focused. Like it was worried about like CPU and like memory utilization, but it wasn't actually like monitoring the actual like application itself, like whether or not if somebody went to the website, if it took like 15 seconds to render the actual page, like we weren't monitoring that. Right? So we were just monitoring like, oh, well, if the CPU is cool and there's no load, then it's all good. And like that's like a terrible way to monitor something. So the other issue was that like from a monitoring tool perspective, like there wasn't any access for non-operations personnel to the monitoring tool. So like the operations people, like they had like, oh, well, we're using this monitoring tool. Obviously we know what's going on with your system, but the application teams themselves had absolutely no idea what was going on with their product. And that's a major issue, right? So there was like no app integration, like we didn't have any business metric monitoring, or like very little of it, or it was like in Splunk, which cost like $1 zillion. So like we were like, okay, we need to figure out a way to like deliver like business metric monitoring in a way that's like you know both affordable and scalable for our platform. And then like from an escalation standpoint, right? Like something goes down and it's like going to the TOC, and the TOC doesn't even know what the product is. And then it's going to systems, and systems is just like, well, everything's cool with the box. Like, there's no load. So, you know, close ticket done, you know, and it's like, no one can buy tickets. This is not good. So we had really bad mean time to detect and mean time to repair, MTTD and MTTR. Okay, so how we solve that? So we went to Zabbix. We looked at Zabbix. It's open source, free. Like, let's try this, right? But rather than like unleash a horde of developers on the Zabbix GUI, which seems like a terrible idea because it's really, really feature rich or confusing, depending on how you look at it, we decided to build like a connector for it. So we said like, okay, let's do this instead. Let's like have people put a file in their code project that can declare like whatever metrics, thresholds, and triggers they want, and then once they upload that, Zabbix will just basically take it into via the API. It'll auto-discover your host, and it'll build out like a monitoring dashboard for you. So we did that, and we're still doing that. It's a work in progress, but that we've had a lot of success with that. And what's cool about it is the development teams, the engineers themselves, they control their destiny, right? They know their product better than anyone. They know their product much better than operations does. And they're able to kind of declare what they care about from a monitoring perspective, from an alerting perspective. And then on top of that, we decided that we would put these developers like actually in the line of fire from a escalation point of view. We would integrate it with the talk, and they would be like the first line of defense. But then after that, it's like, okay, if this isn't working out, we know exactly who to call, and the people that we're calling are the people who wrote the code, right? So we're not throwing it over the wall. We're not having this fragmented ownership where like I build something and then you take care of it. Like I build something, I take care of it. And I build something and it alerts for me because I declared what my SLAs are as a product owner, and then I get escalated too if it's not working out. So we have like business level metrics in our products, and then we're actually responding to outages or alerts as they come in. And that obviously translates into better response times, right? We know our code, we can go in and we can fix it. We can address the situation faster. Okay, so our success metrics on that. So we're monitoring custom metrics for each application. Zabbix has like some advanced trigger expressions. It has ways that you can customize. You can do comparisons between like if this is bad for this many seconds and this is bad for this many seconds, then alert based on this. And we're doing that. And that's working very, very well for us. And we have other monitoring tools too. I'm focusing on Zabbix because my team is actually developing a lot of the customization for it. But you know, we've had some good success with it. So we've got over 50 products in there now. We've got 2,000 production hosts. That might be small or big depending on what company you work for. It alerts the TOC and the Scrum teams directly. We've seen better mean time to detect and repair. And we've got a performance and like ownership culture now, right? So we're able to see the code, and we can see what the code that other people are working on, and we can all collaborate on our code together. We deploy our own products. We don't throw it over the wall to another team. And then when it is in production, we actually know what it's doing. And then in the event that something happens to it, we can respond. So those are three key things that we did, and we used three tools to kind of achieve those cultural changes. And it doesn't really matter what the tool is, right? If you don't like Git, that's cool. Like whatever, just use SVN. But you know, figure out a way to kind of like achieve these goals, right? And you don't have to use Rundeck. You can use Bamboo or whatever thing you want to do, or Docker or something. Lots of cool tools. So we have a toolkit, you know, in our team, my platform team, that we build this, or you know, we steal it, is what we do, and then we kind of like iterate on it. But we kind of present this to the organization to enable them. Like the previous guy was talking about, like we want to enable people, and we're providing tools that you know, empower them to do things, right? And we make it accessible, right? So like I said, with Zabbix, it's like, okay, it's this really, really, really feature-rich thing, and like we want to make sure it's accessible to people, and we don't want people messing it up. So we just kind of give them some means to get in there, do what they need to do, and set up their monitoring for them. So we've seen improved collaboration between our teams, right? We've got ownership for developers in production. We've got a lot of visibility into prod. We didn't have that a few years ago. We weren't even allowed to look. We've got increased confidence in our products, and then that gives you a greater focus on the business. So some takeaways. I've got 8 minutes. Okay. All right. So like I said, like we kind of just rolled these things out, and then we learned Ruby, and then we were good. Like we didn't have like an executive memo that came down from the top and said, as you know, as a CEO of Ticketmaster, I want you to change your culture. Like that wasn't what happened. It's nice to have that, and if you have people who are enthused about what you're doing, that's fantastic. But you can make incremental wins and gains just by introducing tools. That's a really easy, organic way to do it. And maybe it's not going to be full company scale, but you can do things within your team or within a series of teams, and you can make changes even if the executive level doesn't even know what's going on, as long as you don't break anything in production. I think tools are better than process, frankly. Process is good, and maybe tools empower process, right? Like, tools make your process better, right? True believers, then skeptics. So, like, as far as, like, getting people on board, it's like the 10-80-10 rule. You've got 10% of the people who are, like, they're the crazy bleeding edge people, and they'll do anything that you tell them to do, and that's good. And then there's the other 10% who are like, no, I'm not using this newfangled thing that you've brought me, go away. And then you've got 80% who don't really care. They just want to, get their job done. So you go get the true believers and you kind of like get them all riled up and you give them the tools. Thank you. And then they get super excited about it, and then they can just kind of win over the rest of the 80%, right? And then the 10% who are like the brick walls with the bowler hats and stuff, like those people, like, they'll never be won over, but that's okay. Like, you can get most of the people on board and most of the people interested in what you're doing. So, true believers, then tackle skeptics. Fail early and in pre-production, please. And then you can achieve critical mass, right? And you can use that to change company culture. So, we took 3 tools, like, that are just off the shelf and they're free, and we rolled them out after we learned Ruby, and then we changed our company culture, and that's pretty awesome, right? And you can do that with any tool that you think would help your business change their culture, right? And then you'll see, like, dividends based on that. So that's all I got. Thanks.